And welcome back. Or just welcome if you're new here. My name is Rusty, and this is my channel where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And tonight we are finishing up my classic film festival, the first one anyway. We're finishing up filming the end of my classic film festival. And we're doing it with one of my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movies, which I have so many, and that is James Stewart in Rear Window. Yes, Lord, and I will tell you why this is one of my favorite. So, Rear Window was released in 1954, starring James Stewart, Grace Kelly, Wendell Corey, and Raymond Burr, and Thelma Ritter from, that was Margot's assistant in All About Eve. So, yeah. Now, the reason I have so much fun with Rear Window is because it's really, it's imagination fuel for me. I am a nosy motherfucker. Okay, I'm just gonna say it like that. And I was raised that way. I was raised by my two sets of grandparents. And my paternal grandmother was what's called a window watcher. And she's basically Jimmy Stewart. But not because she's in a wheelchair, but just because. You would always find her if you looked from outside my grand's house, you were very likely to see that in the window. Now, she didn't do it for any malicious purpose, and neither do I. There's a big difference between a voyeur for sexual reasons or a voyeur for malicious reasons, and a window watcher, which is just a nosy person. Now, she wasn't digging dirt. She wasn't doing it for a malicious reason, and that's the reason why I've never done that either. You can do anything you want in my neighborhood. I'm probably going to know what you're doing, but I don't care. I'm not going to use it against you. I'm not going to call the cops. I'm not going to get the devil about it. I'm not going to grass you up. I'm not going to stitch you up. I'm not going to do anything with this information. It's just like TV to me. It's just like television. I watch these stupid people doing stupid things. And my grandma, even when I was a little kid, I'd be like, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I was just seeing who that was over at Gladys's house." Or I was seeing who that was. I think, "Oh, it looks like, Miss Thelma's son's got a new girlfriend." She just knew everything, but she didn't use it in any malicious way. And neither have I, but I admit that I am a complete and total nosy mofo, and if you live next to me, I'd know everything you were doing and your underwear size, I'm sure, because I'm always watching. But I'm not doing anything bad about it. I'm not using it for any purpose. Now, people have asked me, if you did see somebody like selling dope or doing something bad, wouldn't you turn them in? No, I'm not a grass. You would have to be doing something like, you could not kill anyone in front of me, or about to kill them, or abuse anyone, or children. I wouldn't put up with any of that. But as far as anything else that's non-violent and non-harmful, if you were buck naked, drunk in the yard, crying about your girlfriend that left or some similar situation, I would just be laughing my ass off at the window, at the back door or something, going, "Oh, Jesus, what an idiot." it. But I'm not going to do anything with the information, is what I'm saying. So that's why I love this movie so much, because you can imagine. I remember when I was a kid and my grandmother watched this movie, and you could just see envy in her face. Like, oh, man, I would just never be away from that window. Yeah, she didn't say that, but I, knowing her, was like, you can get into some of that shit right there. I'm telling you, that's got to be a fantasy. And once I grew up, I found out that I was the same way, probably from, watching her all that time. She made me see how interesting it was to watch other people's lives, but not in a malicious way. So this movie is about L.B. Jeffries. Now, L.B. or Jeff, but L.B. is like a very famous photographer, news photographer, war correspondent, that kind of thing. And he's very, very famous, and he's very sought after, and he ended up getting his leg broke badly. So he is stuck in a wheelchair in his New York apartment, which, because of being stuck, made him notice that he basically had a window into a gigantic apartment complex of everybody's lives, which he had probably never paid attention until he had to sit there with a half body cast. So he had been, noticing everyone, and I love the way that apartment complex is set up, with the center garden, and it looks like some British estates that I've seen, but yeah, the nosy potential is just deliciously tempting. So, but so he's seeing all of these people, and he's even, from his vantage point, he can see pretty much everybody's lives unfold. And it's also very hot, which I didn't think it really got hot in New York. But, I'm from the South. If it falls below 70 degrees, I'm a bitch. I can't stand it. I've never been north of the Mason-Dixon line, and I never will. I mean, when I stayed in England, I'm like, why don't you go back to England more often? I'm like, because it's too fucking cold. People just don't realize the United States and England are not side by side. People like point across the Atlantic, and they're like, well, isn't England, east is just across the Atlantic? No, sweetie, no. No, that's not true. Canada and England are side by side, not America and England. Well, put it this way. The very bottom of England, here's a welcome to Rusty's geography lesson. The southern end of the UK, of England, the southern end, the very bottom of the UK, is directly across from New York, which means that the rest of England, like London, which is in the middle of the UK, and then on up into Scotland and Wales and stuff like that, that England is cold and wet and muggy. Well, it's not muggy because it's fucking cold all the time. But yeah, so if you think about it, the bottom of England is directly across from New York, which is under 60 feet of snow right now. It looks like, the day after tomorrow has come true. Climate change doesn't exist, though. Okay. But, so anyway. So yeah, there you go. That's why I didn't think it got hot in New York. But in this movie, it's very hot. So everybody's got their windows open. They're walking around in their underwear, stuff like that. So he especially notices this couple that's bitching at each other all the time directly across from him, whom we later find out is Lars Thornton. So he's also given all of his neighbors these cute nicknames, which, if you were in his situation, what the fuck else is there to do? So, he's like, he doesn't really know any of these people, so he doesn't know their names, so he's given them names. Lars is the salesman. Miss Lonely Hearts is down there, and this is this really depressive woman who, well, Lonely Hearts. You have Miss Torso, who is right up there, and she's like a dancer, and so she's always in nothing but skimpy outfits, dancing and practicing. And you have the songwriter, and you have Miss Hearing Aid. So he's given them all of these cute little names to tell his nurse and his girlfriend when they come over. Miss Torso's doing this, and the salesman's doing that, and stuff like that. So he has really kind of focused in on Lars because him and his wife are always fighting. She's very harpy-ish, and she's sort of like one of those hypochondriacs. So she's always in the bed, sickly, and then when he comes home, she's always like bitching at him and having to take care of her and stuff like that. So we're then introduced to Stella. Now, Stella's played by Thelma Ritter, who I absolutely love as a character actress. And she is his nurse that was, because of his accident, covered under insurance. Back then they had, I don't know if they still do that today, but back then they had company nurses who went out as part of the payout of insurance to take care of you. So we're introduced to her, and she warns him about all of this peeping that he's doing and that it's going to get him in trouble. They talk about his girlfriend Lisa, which is Grace Kelly, the absolute glorious Grace Kelly, who is... They have trepidations in their relationship. She really loves him, and he really loves her, but he considers himself a dirty little photographer who's always on the go and who's going on to these horrible places and having to live hand to mouth. And she is a Harper's Bazaar magazine type editor. She's very rich. She's very beautiful, very hoity-toity, and stuff like that. And so in his mind, their lifestyles he just doesn't see how it would work, because he's not going to give up his lifestyle, and he can't expect the belle of the ball to hang out and wipe her ass with leaves in the jungle where he can take photos. You see the problem? So that's the problem he has in his head about their relationship, and she wants to, him to marry her, and he just, can't bring himself to do it. So we of course are watching all of these people's lives unfold like he is. We're sort of brought in to the peeping, and I think a lot of people who watch Rear Window get a whole new idea of innocent peeping. It is like TV. I mean, he had 20 channels to watch all of these things that people do. So, she's rich, wants him to settle down, but he doesn't want to. Miss Lonely Heart, so one of the scenes that they show is of her having a pretend date where she got all dressed up, and you're like really embarrassed for her, but at the same time you're really sad for her because she actually gets all dressed up and sets the table, and they think someone's going to arrive for a date, and instead she opens up the door, but there's nobody there, and she invites him in, and she's talking to him, but he's not real, and she sits down and she pretends to have a drink with him, and the look on his face as he's watching, he's just so sad because she is so lonely that she is actually literally having a make-believe date. Not even I have gotten that bad. So we see, Miss Torso with all of her men, and Lars and his harpy wife, and LG LB and Lisa argue about their different lifestyles, which is what I just explained to you. And she ends up like leaving, and oh well, I'll. She's kind of mad, but she's like, I'll be back tomorrow because I love you, and stuff. And he's sitting there watching everything in the middle of the night, and he hears a scream, but when he looks, he doesn't really see anything. You hear this scream. Well, by the end of the movie, you know what that was, but he doesn't really see anything. And so he couldn't really tell where it came from. And then he started noticing a little while later, he started noticing Lars. Their shades are all closed. And he notices Lars leaving like 3 different times at 2 and 3 in the morning. And then, and he just doesn't really understand why a salesman is walking out with his big salesman case, which is like, it's probably like that, by that. So it's a really big salesman case. And, why is he walking? Where is he going at 2 and 3 in the morning? So he knows that he left 3 different times when he fell asleep in his wheelchair. And so he becomes really suspicious about Lars because the next day when Stella shows up, he's telling her, look how hot it is. And yet she tells him about Lars going out, and yet the shades are all closed and he's not seen. In other words, they're acting really different. The shades are staying closed. So he tells Stella about it, and starts to intensely watch Lars's apartment, watch his comings and going. He even manages to zoom in on him wrapping up a little saw and a little handsaw and a big machete-looking knife in newspaper. So Lisa, he then tells Lisa about it on her next visit. She thinks you are like, this is being too much. You know what I mean? You are watching all of these people and losing your fucking mind. And Lisa thinks he's losing it and tries to get him to think that he's paranoid and that this is all crap, until she witnesses him packing a big trunk. She, this chest, the suitcase like thing. She witnesses him packing this trunk, and she starts to believe LB that something is going on. Where is his wife? And she's not in the bed anymore. What is this trunk covered in rope and stuff like that? So Lisa begins helping me. Okay, maybe I did get into this maybe too much. But she begins to help him investigate Lars. Like, she goes around and looks at the letter and like finds his name, so she's able to get his name and all. Now he calls his detective friend and gets him to come over, and he tells him about it. Now, in the meantime, Stella is also beginning to believe him based on what she is saying. Now the detective, he blows it all off, but he'll take a look into it. But when he comes back, he ends up telling LB that his investigation, that he had found out from the landlord or the maintenance guy and some neighbors that she had actually left on a trip, the wife. That she had left on a trip and that there was no murder. But LB insists that just doesn't make any sense because of the things he has witnessed, and he continues to watch. Now, he sees him, because, he's using a telephoto lens and binoculars, so the telephoto lens can get right up into it. And he sees him going through a purse, and he sees, this guy's wife's purse. And he sees him with her jewelry in it, including what looked like, he said, 3 rings, a plain gold band, and what looked like a wedding ring. So, Lisa's, of course, like, no woman would go on a trip without her wedding ring. So, one of the other little things that had been occurring was that one of the people had a dog up on a higher floor up there, and they would lower the little dog down to the courtyard. Now, on several occasions, both Stella and him had witnessed this little dog digging in this flower bed. These are this little flower area that Lars was often taking care of, and the dog kept digging in it. So on this night, he hears a big scream, and he goes out there, or he looks out the window, and so does everyone else in the courtyard in all the apartments. They like come to the window and look, and it's that lady screaming because her dog is laying down there. Her little pooch is laying down there dead, and she's screaming, y'all are not nice neighbors. Nobody knows anybody, and nobody talks to anybody, and who would kill a little puppy like that? And Miss Lonely Hearts comes out and like hollers up at her. She's like, oh my God, his neck is broken. This was like someone actually killed the dog. Now, and Lisa was with him, so Lisa and him are witnessing this exchange. And that's when, was that before or after the detective came? That was, before. But, so they had witnessed this, and they really didn't think much about it at the time. And the detective ends up coming, and she's going to spend the night. But the detective comes back, continues watching, and tells them that there's nothing going on. He tries once again to tell them that even though all of this stuff is kind of strange, that anybody's life is strange if you like put a microscope on it. That your public persona and your persona at home, that if anyone was to put a spotlight on it and really look at it, they would find all kind of weird things that you did that maybe someone else would find suspicious. So the next day, Stella and Lisa and him are talking about this cop who has like tried to make them think that they're, he tried to gaslight them is what he did. And they're talking about this dog, and they're like, he remembers, I've practiced with my camera a lot. I've looked out the window and taken photos. So he goes and gets photos from the newest ones he finds were like from a couple of weeks ago. And that's when they notice that the flowers on the end are lower. Flowers don't grow lower, they grow higher. So that's when they all come to the conclusion that something was buried or is buried underneath those flowers. Now, Lisa, of course, is like, Mrs. Thornton? And she's like, well, not unless she buried him, not unless he buried her standing up. But then they all kind of understand that it might be pieces of his wife. And so, or a piece of his wife. That's when it all starts to come together in their theory that he had killed her, he had dismembered her. That's the reason why he was going out all those times with the suitcase. That's why he was cleaning it that night before he put his stuff back in it. That's why the dog was murdered, because it kept trying to dig up something. So, he ends up like writing a letter. And Lisa goes and like slips it under his door. The reason being, he wants to scare him into, one, not leaving, because he's packing to leave. They know he's trying to get away. And two, to get him away from the apartment so that they can investigate. So LB then calls him and tells him, hey, did you get my letter? I would like to see you at this certain restaurant. Why? What do you want? Well, I think that we should talk about settling the estate of your late wife. So they pretty much know that he's done something. So he agrees. It's like, well, I ain't got a bunch of money. So it's okay. That's a good start. $100 is a good start. Come and meet me. So they end up going down. Stella and Lisa end up going down to check those flowers. And Stella digs them up right after dark. And Stella digs them up, and there's nothing there. So Lisa then gets the wild hair. Well, screw that then. I'm going to go up to his apartment. Now, LB freaks out. Stella freaks out. Like, what are you doing? And LB is like, what are you doing? She goes up, gets in there in his apartment, and finds the jewelry. But Lars comes home. She ain't got nowhere to run and catches her in there. Turns the light off. He's trying to strangle her, but thankfully LB had called his detective friend with this new information about the wedding ring and stuff, and the dead dog and things like that. So Lars comes home and catches her in the apartment, and he attacks her, but the cops get there just in time. Now Lisa allows them to arrest her. It's like anything to get out, right? So she allows him to arrest her. And unfortunately for him, though, while she was talking to the cops and showing, she knew, of course, that LB was like focused in watching her. She had given him the other rings back, but she had slipped the wedding ring on her finger and showed LB that she had that ring. And he saw her doing that, and he looked over and he saw LB. So the jig was up. He knew that she had the ring. That guy is the one that caught him. That guy over there is the one that's been watching him. So they go to take her. They take her, and that's when LB calls the detective again. Tells him that the local cops have taken Lisa to jail. Tells him why. He's like, oh man, y'all would just not stop. And he tells him the further information, and she's like, oh, okay, all right. I will go and get her. She won't need no bail money. I mean, I'm a detective. I will get her and bring her. So they're on their way back. The detective's going to stop, get Lisa, come back. That's when LB notices that Lars's apartment is all dark and everything like that. And he realizes, I'm here alone in a wheelchair. I saw that fucker see me. His house is all dark, and now I'm hearing noises in the hallway. So Lars comes in, and he had like scooted up next to the window, and he had grabbed his flash bulb and had grabbed a whole bunch of flash bulbs to go in it. So Lars comes in, and at first he's just like, what do you want? What do you people want? I need the ring back, and I need y'all to leave me alone. What do you want? I don't have a bunch of money. When he's like, is there anything that I can do to stop all this? And LB is just like, no, I'm not giving you the ring back. She's probably giving it to the cops right now. Well, then that's when he's like, well, then I guess you just need to die. So he starts walking towards him, and LB starts using the flash because he knows the detective is on his way back with Lisa. So he keeps flashing him, and then you can imagine in a pitch black room, because he's turned all the lights off, that a gigantic flash bulb from the 50s, that gigantic, what is that, phosphorus bulbs that they used. But so he would blast one, and Lars would be blinded, for a few seconds while he threw that one out, put another one in, blasted him again. So he's actually like stalling him by blinding him every 2 steps. That's kind of cute. Now, he sees the detective and Lisa show up, because that's what he keeps looking over there for. He sees them show up right as he's run out of his last bulb, and Lars is on him like a bear. Yeah. The struggle is like really intense, and he grabs him up out of the chair and he throws him across the bed and starts trying to strangle him, and he has screamed, so the detective and Lisa had heard, and they were all running with a bunch of cops, and he ends up grabbing him and like throwing him out the window, and poor LB is just hanging on by his fingers, and he ends up, they bust open the door, they come in, they grab Lars, but he falls and busts the whole other side of his body. So thankfully, and the detective tells them what Lars had said, which is, yes, that he had confessed, and that he was going to take them on a tour of the East River. So that was what he was doing, was throwing her body parts away. And as far as, and then Stella is like, and that's the end line of the story, is that Stella looks up at the detective and is like, well, what was that was buried in the flower bed? And he was like, oh yeah, that's, he moved it. The dog was getting too curious and trying to dig it up. And she's like, well, what was it? He's like, well, it's up there in a hat box. And that's when Stella was like, realized that it was her head that was buried in that flowers. And he's like, do you want to know what it was? And she's like, no, I think I know, and I don't want no part of her. And realized what she said. And then we get to see all of this activity going on. We see a bunch of little wrap-ups of these stories that we've watched. And we see that LB is in his chair, facing the wall, not looking out the window, not paying attention to any of it, asleep, with 2 giant casts on his legs now. So he broke the other side of his body. And then we see Lisa sitting on the bed, looking at some kind of travel magazine, and then realizing that he's asleep, and she puts it down and picks up the Harper's Bazaar. And that's it. That's the way the movie ends. So, yes, I absolutely love Rear Window. Everything about Rear Window is flawless. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock, so many. This definitely ranks up there. I guess my top 5 would be Psycho and the Birds, Rope, Rear Window, Strangers on a Train. Would that be my top 5? But I love Alfred Hitchcock. I love a lot of his movies. But I think that would probably be my top 5. Isn't Lifeboat an Alfred Hitchcock movie too? Because that would definitely be number 6. I'm not sure if that's an Alfred Hitchcock movie or not. But Rear Window. What year was Rear Window? Didn't I just say it? 1954. Okay. So yes, Rear Window, James Stewart, Jimmy Stewart, Grace Kelly. And that does it for my favorite classic film festival. Seven of my favorite classic films, and I will have fun doing another one sometime. Next up, though, is Shark Week. I'm going to be doing Shark Week next. I've got to watch and scripts and all. I've even got them all picked out. For my first Shark Week. 7 of my favorite shark movies. And yeah, so that's what's coming up next. And I think I'm going to have a lot of fun doing that, getting back into some horror now that I've taken a little Halloween break. And I will see you, hopefully. Thank you very much if you took the time to watch some of my rambling about my favorite movies. I do appreciate it. I don't really ask for anything except a like and a comment, and just enjoy. That's all. And I hope I will get to see you in another one. Love you, miss you. Bye-bye. And always remember, never forget, you're a very special person, even if you're not a window peeper who fucks up and sees a murder, which is always a risk you take when you stick your nose into other people's lives, especially in this day and age. Bye-bye. See you next one. Rear Window rocks.